I never thought my best friend would one day confess their love to me. And what's even bigger, I knew I would have to say no. Why I said no in the end, you'll understand if you watch till the end. I'm Liam. I never thought the biggest story of my life would start with a simple hi message. That night, I was sitting alone, scrolling through my phone without any purpose. Suddenly, a notification came. A very simple message. Are you awake? I was surprised because this wasn't someone I talked to every day. Still, strangely, seeing the message brought a smile to my face. I wrote, "Yeah, why?" They wrote, "I can't sleep. Want to talk?" That night, we picked up a call to talk for 5 minutes, but I didn't even realize when 5 minutes turned into 3 hours. We talked about everything, completely random things. Favorite songs, silly childhood memories, strange fears, even things I don't usually tell anyone. And that very night, I realized one thing. Talking to this person felt strangely easy. After that, it became a habit. Every night we talked. Sometimes we laughed so much that our stomachs hurt. Sometimes we stayed completely quiet, just listening to each other's breathing. Slowly, they became a part of my day. Whenever I went somewhere, I took pictures and sent them. If something funny happened, they were the first person I told. Even on bad days, I knew there was someone who would listen to me with full attention. One day, I told them, "You've become my best friend now." They were quiet for a few seconds. Then they laughed and said, "Good thing you said it first. I thought I was the only one thinking that." That moment was very small, but strangely, very important. Because from then on, we started seeing each other not just as friends, but as a safe place. We created countless little moments together. Going out for ice cream at 2 a.m., running in the rain laughing, taking long walks for no reason, and talking about big dreams in life. They always said, "No matter what happens, you'll stay, right?" Without thinking, I would say, "Always." And I truly believed it. But there was one thing I didn't understand back then. When people get very close, the line between friendship and something else becomes very thin. One day, we were sitting in a park. The sun was setting and there was a calm silence all around. We weren't really talking, just sitting side by side. Suddenly, I noticed they were looking at me. I said, "What?" They quickly looked away and said, "Nothing." But a lot was hidden inside that nothing. When I got home that day, I felt strange. It felt like something was changing, but I convinced myself it was just my overthinking. Because to me, they were my best friend, and I valued our friendship more than anything in the world. Still, after that day, I started noticing small changes. They cared more than before. They worried if I replied late. If I spent more time with someone else, they would become strangely quiet. At first, I thought it was cute, but slowly, a fear started growing inside me. What if our friendship changed? What if we lost that easy, happy place we had? I tried to push these questions out of my head because I knew some relationships are so beautiful that they don't need to be called by any other name. And I desperately wanted our relationship to stay exactly like that. After a few days, I realized that no matter how much I tried to convince myself, something really was changing. Before, when we were together, everything felt natural, but now, sometimes an odd silence would appear, not uncomfortable, but very heavy, as if we both wanted to say something, but neither of us did. One evening, we were standing on a small bridge in the city. The car lights were moving below, and the air was cold. Suddenly, they said, "Have you ever thought how people realize they're afraid of losing someone?" The question was so sudden that I stayed silent for a few seconds. I laughed and said, "When they realize their day feels incomplete without that person." They looked at me. I had never seen that look before, very calm but deep. Softly, they said, "Then I understand." I felt a slight pressure in my chest. I knew what those words could mean, but I pretended I didn't understand, because sometimes pretending not to understand is easier. After that night, I tried to create a little distance, not out of desire, but out of fear. I didn't want anything to happen that would put our friendship at risk, but keeping distance wasn't easy, because they had become my habit. One day, I was having a really bad day. Work pressure, 1,000 thoughts in my head. I didn't tell anyone anything. I just stayed quiet. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was them. As soon as I answered, they said, "What happened?" I was surprised. Nothing. They stayed silent for a few seconds and then said, "Don't lie to me. I can hear it in your voice." That was one thing they could always do. Understand even when I said nothing. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told them everything, messily, without any arranged words. They just listened the whole time. Then softly said, "You know you're not alone, right?" Hearing that simple sentence brought tears to my eyes, because sometimes people don't need big solutions. They just want someone to stay beside them, and they always did. At that moment, I realized no matter how scared I was, pushing this person out of my life wasn't possible. A few days later, we went on a small trip, somewhere quiet outside the city. All day we wandered around, laughed, took pictures. Everything felt like before. I started thinking maybe I had been worrying for nothing. At night, we were sitting on the hotel rooftop. The sky was full of stars. They said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." After hesitating a little, they said, "Have you ever thought, what if we weren't just best friends?" The question hung in the air. My heartbeat sounded very loud to me. I knew this moment would come. Still, I wasn't ready. I stared at the sky for a while, buying time. Then I said slowly, "I really like what we have now. It's very rare." They didn't say anything, just nodded. But I saw a hint of pain in their eyes. That night built an invisible wall between us. We were talking and laughing like before, but a certain caution had crept in somewhere. I could feel that they had bravely tried to open a door, and I had gently closed it. After we returned home, we talked less for a few days. I missed them, strangely, a lot. That's when I understood. No matter what you call a relationship, feelings are never just black and white. There are many shades of gray in between. One night, I called them myself. As soon as they answered, they said, "Hey." There was a distance in their voice. I said, "I miss you." The line stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then very softly they said, "Me too." That small exchange melted a little of the ice that had built up between us. We started talking again, slowly, carefully, but this time I knew we both shared a truth that neither of us was saying out loud, and that unspoken truth was making every moment between us a little more precious and a little more fragile. Time is a strange thing. Some moments pass very quickly, and some move so slowly that it feels like time itself has stopped. The days I spent with them were somewhere in between. We were becoming like before again. At least that's how it looked from the outside. We joked, laughed about each other, remembered old memories. But deep inside, I was always aware. Behind every laugh, there was a hidden question. How long will this last? One day, we went to one of our favorite places, a small lake on the edge of the city. We had been there many times before. That day, the weather was beautiful. Soft sunlight, cool air. We were sitting by the lake with our legs hanging over the edge. Suddenly, they said, "Do you remember the first time we came here?" I laughed and said, "Of course, you were giving the wrong directions the whole way." They burst out laughing. That laugh was very familiar to me, very dear. After a moment of silence, they said, "That day I was thinking, I don't get comfortable with people easily, but I did with you." I didn't say anything. I just listened. They said again, "You're my safe place." Hearing that gave a slight ache in my chest, because I knew I felt the same way, but I was trying to keep that feeling within a certain boundary. Softly, I said, "You're mine too." We both smiled, but inside that smile was a silent confession. On the way home that day, they were very quiet. I asked a few times, "Everything okay?" They just said, Yeah, just thinking of it. I didn't push them. That night I was lying in bed, but I couldn't sleep. Their words kept echoing in my head. You're my safe place. I could feel we had reached a point where any small decision could change everything. A few days later, something happened that shook me from the inside. We were at a small get-together with friends. Everyone was laughing and talking. I noticed they were standing a little apart. When I went closer, I saw someone trying to flirt with them, a completely normal thing. But strangely, a discomfort grew inside me. I told myself this was normal. They had their own life. Still, I couldn't stay calm. They looked at me and smiled lightly as if to say everything was fine, but I could tell they were watching my reaction. At that moment, I faced a hard truth. The thought of losing them made me uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure if it was only because of friendship. At the end of the night, we were walking separately together. Silence surrounded us. Suddenly, they said, "You were a little strange today." I said, surprised, "Why?" They replied, "When I was talking to them, you went quiet." I stayed silent for a moment. Then I told the truth. Maybe I got a little protective. They stopped and looked at me. Protective? Why? There wasn't an easy answer to that question. I took a deep breath and said, "Because you're very important to me." Their eyes softened. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. Then, very quietly, they said, "You know, you're just as important to me." That moment was very calm, but inside, a storm was raging. I could feel it. We were both standing very close to a boundary, and maybe very soon, one of us would have to cross it. After that night, I walked alone for a long time. The streetlights, the cold air, everything felt normal except for the inside of my head. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. What do I actually want? Do I want to keep them only as my best friend? Or is something growing inside me that I'm deliberately refusing to name? But every time I got close to that question, a fear stopped me. I didn't want to lose our friendship, because I knew relationships can break, people can change, but a true friendship, that's very rare. And I didn't want to put something that rare at risk. Over the next few days, we talked very normally, but I noticed that sometimes they looked at me as if they wanted to say something. One afternoon, they texted me, "Can you meet today for a bit?" The message was very simple. Still, I felt a slight pressure in my chest. I wrote, "Yeah, where?" We met at our old park. The sun was setting, the sky was painted orange. I saw them sitting on the bench, their hands clasped together, looking a little nervous. I sat beside them and smiled, saying, "What's wrong? Why do you look so serious?" They looked at me for a few seconds, then looked down. I could tell this moment was important. Taking a deep breath, they said, "I've been thinking about something for a long time." My heartbeat started to rise. They said, "I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just a phase, but the more time passes, the clearer it becomes." I listened quietly. My hands were getting cold. They looked at me. There was both fear and courage in their eyes. "I really like you, not just as my best friend, but more than that." The words hung in the air. I had always known this day would come. Still, when the truth stood in front of me as spoken words, I forgot how to breathe for a moment. All the surrounding sounds seemed to fade away. There was only the two of us and that confession. They quickly added, "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know, because I couldn't pretend anymore." I looked into their eyes. There was no pressure there, only honesty. And that honesty made my chest feel even heavier, because I knew my answer might hurt them. Slowly, I said, "I love you very much." A light lit up in their eyes, but I didn't stop. But not in the way you're thinking. The smile on their face slowly faded.
I could tell they were preparing themselves. I said, "You're such a big part of my life that I don't want to give it a label, because the moment we call this a relationship, expectations will change, pressure will come, fear will come." My voice was getting heavy, and I'm scared. What if one day we hurt each other? What if one day we drift apart? Then I won't just lose you as a partner, I'll lose my best friend too. They listened quietly. Tears were gathering in their eyes, but they weren't trying to hide them. I moved a little closer and said, "You're such a big part of my life, and that's how I see you. I can't step into a relationship because I can't risk losing our friendship." After I said the words, it felt like the air around us had grown heavy. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, they nodded and gave a small, painful smile. "I knew you might say something like this," they whispered. My chest twisted painfully. "I'm sorry." They quickly shook their head. "No, there's nothing to be sorry for. You were honest, and that's what I wanted." They looked up at the sky. The sun was almost set. The orange light was falling across their face. They said, "I just wondered if there was a chance." I knew no words would be enough in that moment. Still, I said, "You'll always be in my life. That won't change." They looked at me. There was pain in their eyes, but also a kind of peace. "Then promise me something," they said. "What?" "No matter what happens, we won't let this become a wall between us. We'll stay the way we were, true best friends." I didn't hesitate for even a second. "I promise," I said. We both smiled lightly. There was a little pain in that smile, but also relief, because we had faced a hard truth and still hadn't lost each other. That day, we slowly walked out of the park. There was silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence of understanding. As I walked, I thought, not every love story ends in a romance. Some kinds of love are most beautiful as friendship, and maybe our story was exactly like that. They were walking beside me, just like before, familiar, safe. Suddenly, they nudged my shoulder lightly and said, "Hey, why do you look so serious?" I laughed. "Nothing. I was just thinking how lucky I am." "Why?" they asked. I looked at them and said, "Because I have a best friend I wouldn't trade for anything." They looked at me for a few seconds, then smiled, that familiar, warm smile. And in that moment, I understood. Maybe we chose a different path, a little harder, a little more complicated. But we both knew this friendship was real, and real things survive in the end. We walked on and disappeared into the night. Two people who love each other, but more than that, are each other's best friends. And for me, that was enough. Maybe not every story ends with romance. Some stories end with a decision. The decision to hold on to someone instead of losing them. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll change. Maybe life will lead us down different paths. But today, I know one thing for sure. Our friendship was real,